right, so the recording has begun. Right. So today, let me just share a screen. Are we in the right place? Yes. All right, so today I wanted to do something a little bit more relaxed, give you guys a chance to catch up with homework. I had a session with Martina today, one with Eleanor, and next week I'm going to be off, but I'm very happy to, if you want a recap, I'll happily take you through, whatever questions you have. Because, for some of us here, like Omar, he's got a lot of programming experience. So I guess for you, Omar, this is easier to grasp. But if you've never done programming before, like I see from some of the questions that I've had so far that I've probably gone too fast on the JavaScript part. So I'm very happy to take time, help you catch up. Just have a look in my calendar after next week, and we can spend time. So the idea today would be to do something a little bit more relaxed. So you don't need to understand everything. But what I wanted to show you today is, as a kind of an Easter break, is give you a tour of what we've got with the TX Academy application, just to give you a feel of, what can be possible, and also maybe for the people with also development experience, it gives you maybe some pointers on how to build a more complex application, what kind of tools you want to build. At the same point, don't let anyone some of the things I'll show you here, you don't need to do for most automation. And I'll just say, like this TX Academy project began as some very simple scripts I wrote. And the more I started to do, and then also we had, for example, HR wanting to use TX Academy as well, the more I needed to professionalize the approach, so that I could kind of manage the application, maybe get more people involved, that kind of stuff. So things you see here, many of them you don't need to do, but it might be, I hope, interesting to you guys, just to give you a feel of what's possible. That okay so far? All right. You can add questions on the chat. Let's just get the chat alive here. Okay, cool. All right, so basically you've all used it because you signed up for this course, and this is basically what happens when so if you're on the website over here on TX Academy and you fill in the registration form, what happens is the data from the form gets sent via Zapier. Zapier is a software as a service tool that specializes in integrating different applications and getting them connected. So the data from the form goes across to Zapier. I think I pronounced it right. Zapier. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And then from there, it goes into the spreadsheet. So it gets added as a row to the spreadsheet. Once that happens, then there's something that's called a trigger that runs. And the trigger then runs some of the code I've written, which does a whole bunch of different things, like it checks on the email address if this is like an internal or external person. For HR, they don't want external people signing up, so we do that. Check if the course is full already, send a confirmation email, send a calendar invite. So this is the type of stuff it does. And let me give you a quick look around at the tools themselves. So this is the TX Academy website, of course. It runs on WordPress. It's actually hosted on this service called WP Engine, who seem to be super slow right now. Or maybe my son is playing first-person shooter games in the room next door. It could be either. Anyway, so this is the administration tool for WordPress. It runs on WP Engine, which is guys that run WordPress. Personally, I'd rather use a service like that for WordPress because it's easier to take care of like security issues and stuff. And one of the things we have here is this WordPress plugin called Forminator. And with Forminator, you can build and design forms. So let's see. Yeah, let's just take a little look at this one. It's a simple form. So you can basically drag and that form is less simple than I expected, actually. Let's just see what the preview looks like. See if this actually is simple. Yeah, okay, it's fairly simple. All right, so you fill in a few fields, and all of this can be designed here. You can do conditional logic, etc. So you can display parts of a form depending on what people entered. The real part is that you can set up an integration. And this is where with Zapier, you specify a link, and that allows you to send data from the form to Zapier. So let's just check in on Zapier quickly. I can give you a feel for how that looks. So in Zapier, you then set up an integration where you take data from the form and push it to a Google spreadsheet. And so here you define a bunch of stuff like there's the link that we saw in the form here. So that's this thing here. Here it is. So that's the link that we need to use. And then this is data. It gets a sample of data it got from the form when it was submitted. Then you can say, okay, I want this to get sent to Google Sheets and to create a row in a spreadsheet. It's going to use my account, and then you can specify like which document, which spreadsheet should be used on Google Drive, which sheet on the spreadsheet, so it's the inbox sheet, and then you can map all the fields to columns in the spreadsheet. So here we've got all the columns of course registrations, and here we're mapping the data from the form across to the spreadsheet. Okay. Shout if you have any questions or post on chat. So that's basically the flow of what happens there. One little detail there. So we have all the registrations here. Actually, one tip I would use there is I have a separate sheet called inbox, and Zapier puts records in there and then copies them. So because in the main registration sheet, it could be that people play around in here, apply filters to things and that kind of stuff, and that can screw up the code. So I use the inbox sheet as the place where data comes in, and that's where I have my code act on it and choose if this is a valid registration or if the course is full. Like, for example, for this course, we had more people sign up than we had available. I'm interested by some of these people who signed up there. That's interesting. Anyway, yeah, so the tip there, yeah, then maybe that's too much detail right now. All right, so that's basically the flow of what happens with the TX Academy website. Now, if we go in a little bit further, maybe one detail that I haven't yet shown you is you can have logging done offline. And so we've seen that you can use this logger.log for debugging. But if you use console.log or methods like console.error, you can log things that happen in the background while you're not looking at them. So for example, someone registers for a course. What I can do, if I go across to this spreadsheet and open the script editor, then I can go to across to here and go to the dashboard for this project. And then you can see here, that one actually doesn't give much useful information. Surprisingly enough, it's just like one log message. Here we go. This one's a bit more interesting. So we've seen that there's a new registration come in. Someone signed up for a course, and then we sent the registration email. So this was for a TX talk we did last week. Sent them a calendar invite. So we've logged all the things. And so if there are any problems, like if someone sends you an email like, okay, I signed up and I didn't get anything, then I will go in and have a look at these and see what went wrong. So that's just to introduce you to the console log. So you access it from your project dashboard, have a look at, say, executions, and then you can go through and look at exactly what happened. Okay. Maybe jumping, what have we got next? Yeah, let's take a look at the trigger now. So another feature that I've been mentioning a little bit is you have this idea of triggers. And a trigger is like when something, well, in programming terms, you call this like an event. But when something happens, like someone adds a row to a spreadsheet, then some code should run. So that's what's happening here. We're basically saying the event source is a spreadsheet, and when anything changes in the spreadsheet, call this function that's unregistered, and this is the code that I've written. And then the unregistered function looks a bit like this. So here I check that this was really a row inserted, and then I figure out a few different things like, so I get the data from the inbox, I figure out if the email is okay, like if it's a valid email address, then I check if the course is full, and if those two things didn't happen, then we can say, okay, this is a valid registration, notify the person responsible for the course, confirm the registration, etc., etc. And there you see me using the log as well. So we're sending out log messages like new registration. Yeah, so these triggers, the triggers are, you can also trigger on things like date. So you can say on a particular day or every Friday, I want something to happen. Let's take a little look while we're just wandering around. So you can access the triggers up here. And if I add a trigger, you know, you can have time driven, so you can run a trigger on a periodic basis, like every few minutes, every month, etc. You can have it driven by a calendar, or in this case, let's look at another example. Now, this is a standalone script, which means that I don't have access to spreadsheet triggers. But if I go to this one, which is a container-bound script, like attached to this spreadsheet, here I can also say that the event source is a spreadsheet, and I can say, like, if the spreadsheet was opened or edited or changed, or a form was submitted, then run some code. And we'll look at that. We'll come back to this stuff. So I'm just showing you a lot of stuff today. And again, you can just take it in and relax, everybody relax. And we'll be coming back to the stuff that we can actually build applications with. But the spreadsheet triggers can be useful I think with Michael, we were talking about a case where he wanted to build like an input mask for a spreadsheet, and you could build that kind of stuff. So when someone clicks in a field and tries to make a change, that you pop up a form and have people fill in the form, which then gets pushed into the value here. So if you want to make sure that I don't know, like that an email address has is a proper email address, or if you have like a special number that you want people to format correctly, you could build something like that where they just click in the cell and then up pops a window where they can fill in the value of the cell using a more complicated form. All right. So those are just some ideas of things you can do with triggers. Another thing is web apps. With the TX Academy, so here's how you would access, like basically any code you can publish as a web app. It's up here on the menu in the script editor, and you have to each time update the version. When you make an update, you can say who has access, so you can publish a web app without exposing it to the whole world. And this is an example, like, let me show you that. So here I have deploys web app. That's the link to the web application. So if I open up a new tab, here you can see this is a web page. And the idea of this thing is to make it possible. Basically, all it's showing is data that's already in the spreadsheet. But what I do is I summarize things in a way that I can share this with people without having to share the spreadsheet. So it allows, I don't necessarily want everyone to be able to edit data in the spreadsheet. And it gives a useful summary so that rather than having to analyze the data yourself, it's already telling you how many people registered for each course. And then I can go in, like if we look here, there are all of us, for example. And you can build all kinds of stuff with this. Like another example, this is the thing we do for hack days. And this was very quickly done. So we have, in fact, I can show you that live. So for the hack days is an event we do with engineers, allowing like a day, kind of a couple of days away from the normal business to work on, I don't know, like interesting projects or crazy projects. Now, the source of the data or who's attending came from TX Academy. So people register for the hack days. Very slow to load right now, but they fill in this registration form. From that, I quickly whipped up this web page, which lists everyone who's already signed up. And then it's also coming up with ideas for projects that people want to do. And here I simply link to a Google form where people can fill in their project idea. And once they do that, it would automatically then appear in this list. So it's a simple way to build an interactive website. And in terms of code, it's very simple. So this is the code for handling like a web app. You have to have this special function called doGet. Then we have some HTML, and we'll be looking at this stuff in some detail later. So there's a bunch of HTML. For the developers, there is a kind of a template language that gets processed server-side by Google Apps Script. And yeah, you have this function that Google Apps Script provides called create template from file. So that's the file that opens. Yeah, and that plus this, which is the style sheet, for that web page ends up in being this. So it's basically not a lot of code to produce something that ends up being a fairly useful web application. Yeah, good. So any questions so far? Like all clear so far in terms of what's possible? Cool. Okay. So let me dive into something. Well, we got plenty of time. Maybe we just cover one more thing first. So one of the things this is where are we here? So this is all the code for the core part of TX Academy. Now you can see there's quite a lot of files here. There's like one main chunk. You can see, for example, in the last lesson, there's a mapping columns here to the columns in the spreadsheet, so that later on in the code, I don't have to hard code column numbers, but I can actually do, I can actually name, like for example, this. So I can refer to a column without hard coding a number. So if the structure of the spreadsheet changes, all I need to do is update this central bit. Yeah, so there's a bunch of code in here. I'm not going to go through all of it in detail, but one particular point is this idea of templates. So and here we've got because there are various different emails that get sent. For example, this is the registration email when you signed up to TX Academy. So it's very simple. It's like, thank you for registering for course name. Dear, that's the name of the person that attended. You are now registered for the course name. In a moment, you will receive, and it links to the calendar invite with further information. In the meantime, if you know of someone else, please encourage them to register at the URL. So that's on the TX Academy website. And then it just says all the best. And the name of the administrator depends on who's responsible for the course, etc. So that's basically the template for an email. Now you'll notice there's the same thing here in German. So I'm doing like some simple like internationalization of these emails just using the file name. And then if I look, yeah, it probably somewhere down here. Nope, 1 second. Ah, yeah, there we go. So yeah, so here's basically how I'm handling some of the email parts. So you see I've translated the subjects and then I send email based on the language, basically. So in this send email function down here, basically it reads the file using the HTML service. So that basically generates the HTML content that's sent as an email. You have this HTML body function. So once we've processed the HTML, injected the values we needed to put in there, then we can send it out as an HTML email. Yeah. And the same principle basically works for web pages. So you have a page of HTML and you process it in Google Apps Script. Yeah. So that's just like a little bit on templates. We'll come back to templates and look at that in detail. And I'll show you the whole principles of building web apps and stuff in a later lesson. Another thing here now, there's the next three topics are kind of more for the developers, but still it's worth being aware of. Now, with TX Academy, I reached a point where we had like at least two different kind of groups using TX Academy. So HR wanted to publish their courses, and then we've got the existing TX Academy courses, and it basically pushed things to a level where I want to have different spreadsheets, one that the HR people have access to, one for me with TX Academy. So it made sense to basically take most of the code that I'd been developing kind of in a need-driven basis and tidy it up and then publish it as a library. Now, library is a way that you can centralize a bunch of code that you've written so that it can be reused in many different projects. So if you had like, I don't know, like a standard bunch of utilities that you use whenever you're automating spreadsheets, you could put all of that in a library. And then every time you start a new script for a specific spreadsheet, you could go and reuse your library. And that's how this looks. So all that code I was just showing you with the email templates and so on, that's the TX Academy GScript library. And when you look on the file menu in the script editor, you can click Manage Versions. And that basically allows me, let's just get rid of this little box here. That basically allows me to publish versions of the library as I add more features. So if you have like, I don't know, let's say on this list, version 4 is the current stable version of the library, but then I add some more features, I can create a new version containing those features, test them properly without affecting other code that's using version 4. So it gives you a way to kind of manage how you release the code in a kind of a sane way. And then so this is the library. Then in this particular script, which is a container-bound script on the spreadsheet, I can say, all right, here's the library. I want to use that library. I want version 2. The identifier is basically the name for when I call any of those functions. We can look at this in more detail, or we can talk one-on-one if any of this is unclear. But so basically, between the library and the code using the library, you can manage versions and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool if you're building a bigger application. Another thing, again, this is more of a developer thing, is it's possible to do testing. I've been using this thing called the Google AppScript testing framework, which is on GitHub. And this output here gives you an example of like a bunch of tests that pass. So for those, there's a question from Lucas. Can it be done via Google Sites? Now, this is a good question because we have Michelle here as well. There's a small problem that in our G Suite license, we didn't license Google Sites. So you could do some of the things I showed you for web apps in Google Sites, but Google Sites, as I understand them, are largely for static websites. So ones where you publish only and you don't expect users to interact. But what you could do, which would be cool, is like if you have a form, like, let me just jump back because I'm just going back to Lucas's question. So let's say this page here that I showed you before, or this form, I could embed those using iframes, which is an HTML feature that allows you to embed one web page in another web page. So I could embed these things in a Google site, and then just have a nice friendly link. One downside of these apps, these web apps, is you end up with links that URLs that look like this, which is very hard to remember. And if you could embed all of that in a Google site, that would make it much nicer for users. But unfortunately, as I say, we don't have the Google Sites license. So lobby your local Michelle, if you want to defend yourself, now's the time. But lobby your local G Suite enterprise manager, and there you go. Okay. All right, so we looked at libraries, testing. The other thing, often in development environments, you have different, in sort of more professional development approaches, you have multiple environments like development, kind of testing, production, or sometimes this is called staging. Sometimes you even have more environments than this. So development is where developers are working on new features. Testing QA might be where you have people that actually testing the code works, and then production is where you're actually live and you have end users. And the approach I've taken to this, so where I have a shared library for TX Academy, then I have different spreadsheets, like I have a development spreadsheet where I'm building things, and I have the live one called main, which is where real registrations are coming in. So that's just the approach I've used to be able to create different environments so that I can add new features without breaking anything that people might already be using. Yeah. Another thing I'll just show you guys quickly, this again for the developers, is this tool called Clasp. So Clasp is a command line tool that I think some guys working at Google developed this, and it allows you to work from the command line with Google Apps Script. So if you want to work with your own text editor on your own machine, Clasp, if you'll allow me to just be a bit geeky, Clasp is a little bit like using Git. You connect it to your Google Apps Script project. You can use Clasp push to push all your local files to Google, and Clasp pull to pull everything from Google. So in terms of like TX Academy, I've been using this because also I have the code in version control outside of Google on GitHub, and that makes this easier. Anyway, that's just a thing. If you're a developer, you may want to look at that. Okay. Yeah, I'm already at the homework. Anyway, that was a quick tour. I think a lightweight lesson so far. What I'd suggest maybe some, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be away next week. And it give some of you a chance to catch up on homework if you want. But I think a good thing, so homework from this lesson would be more this, to flesh out more detail with the use cases you came up with. Like if you have something, or if you want to, or if you don't have an idea right now, maybe think of something you'd be interested to try. Like try and document a use case that would be useful to you for something where you could use Google Apps Script to automate. And this is just a few tips. Maybe people have more ideas or want to share things on Slack while I'm away. But identifying like the data flow, like you say, like every week I receive these emails containing Excel spreadsheets. So how I want to merge that into a single sheet and then send emails to people containing reports. And so identify the flow. A big thing would also be collecting sample data, ideally sanitized for any critical, say, customer or user information. And also a little bit identify or document who's actually going to be using this and the user experience they should receive, like how they should interact with this automation. And if you can document it in Google Slides as much as possible, plus any sample data on Google Drive, what we can do in later lessons, is basically work on one of these use cases. I see Lucas asking, can you share your library with us? You're welcome to play with it. It's not really in a state where it's well enough documented, but the code, let me just see. Oh, okay, it was a joke. Okay. Yeah. All right. I don't understand irony anyway on jokes. So especially via chat. So yeah. Anyway, there's some homework. Any questions right now, or like there was a kind of a broad outline of a bunch of things. Yeah, of what you saw today, or the anything that triggers thoughts or otherwise. Okay. I mean, okay, great. Yeah, anyway, so what are the most common mistakes when using Google Script in your experience? Well, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think one thing about Google Apps Script is it's surprising to me. First, is more a conceptual mistake. It's surprising to me that people aren't using Google Apps Script a lot more. And my theories on this is that there's basically, if we split people into two groups of like developers and people that are non-developers, but maybe business analysts or product managers or otherwise, if you've got those two groups, the non-developers struggle with just getting started. So, and I hope we're fixing that with this course. But if you don't have any help, it's kind of maybe very overwhelming to get started with this. Meanwhile, the developers are more like, yeah, this looks like some rubbish that I don't want to touch. You know, like this just looks like a kid's toy. That you can't, it's you know, it's for those spreadsheet things. Like, I'm not interested in that. Once you actually see, so what the developers I think struggle with is that they don't realize how powerful this platform can be. I can give you another quick example of an application. So let me just get the link to this. Carol, who developed the MMA bot, has been, he developed this thing. Let's hope this is going to load. Yeah. So this is again Google Apps Script. So what he does is, from the micro mentoring bot, he exports the data into a spreadsheet, and this word cloud is being generated all with Google Apps Script. And it gives you an overview of all the different skills that people have been putting. Like, so if we click on Slack bots, for example, and then he's even linked these so that you can see in Slack who that person is. So this is now becoming actually a really useful application. And I think the power of this is just awesome. So it means often developers have the problem that you have to think about yeah, like having a good environment to run every new application, that you need to go and talk with your operations people. Oh, can you set me up something on Amazon or on this server so that I can run this application? As you can see with this word cloud, for example, Carol could just create a spreadsheet, dump the data in there, and then with a relatively simple script, generate this word cloud, which gives an overview of all the skills, or some of the skills anyway, in the TX micro mentoring bot database. And then you can see, okay, so who are some of the top project managers around there? You can see who they are. Oops, this thing. Okay, we got a few details on the user experience to solve here, but anyway, I mean, basically, you could then see the net, security. Oh yeah, Andreas Schneider's the person I want to talk to, or who knows about DevOps? Oh, these guys do. So we've gone from like raw data to useful application in a very simple way. Yeah, so those are like conceptual mistakes. Another thing to watch out for, by the way, is when you have multiple windows with the text editor open, because these don't actually sync properly. So if you've got multiple windows, this is like a mistake. Don't get caught out by this. So if you happen to have multiple tabs with the same text editor, if you make changes in one of them, they will only appear in the other if you.
You're muted.
Lucas muted me. What are you doing, Lucas? That's okay. Lucas.
Hey, sorry, I was going to mute myself, but I guess I pressed the wrong shortcut.
You were just like, I've heard enough.
No, sorry.
No worries. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, watch out for having the code open in different tabs. I've stabbed myself or shot myself in the foot with that before. I think otherwise, I don't know. I would just say maybe this is not so much a mistake, but more of an approach. Is it's very hard to do things wrong with Google Apps Script. I mean, the worst case is you send spam to all your colleagues, probably. But because like the spreadsheet and the code, everything is getting saved with every change that's made. You can't really cause a disaster with it. In which case, I would say in general, it's best to have an approach of like, yeah, just start doing things. And like the TX Academy code base, this may look somehow impressive to have all these different files. I could probably find for you a previous version of this where it was messier. So I wasn't, yeah, like this is an earlier version of the code. Before I turned it into yeah, this is actually a really old version. And I just started really simple, like just start with bits, get something working, and just kind of grow the thing bit by bit, not kind of trying to make an amazing, perfect piece of software, but just get bits working and build it up from there. Because along the way, with all of this automation stuff, it's often very hard to specify exactly what should happen up front. And like with TX Academy in particular, I'd never organize courses for people on say a large number. So, I've organized a meetup or two before, but actually organizing courses for a company with many different people, I had no idea at the beginning what would really be needed. And over time, we've just taken more and more small steps as we've learned how this works, where the problems are, what's useful, what saves time. And gradually this TX Academy code has built up to be useful and save time on those things. Yeah. That was a long speech. But did you have a more specific type of mistake in mind, Omar?
No, not really. Just in general.
I mean, I think
what we should look out.
I mean, I think it's a good question. I guess my point is really also, especially if you're getting started, don't worry too much about making mistakes. Most of the things are pretty intuitive. Like once you get into it, I mean, there's one thing, for example. So this was like a thing I learned from doing the TX Academy registration. So we've got this tab registrations with all the people that have signed up in it. And the first version of this, I used to have, if you look at this workflow where Zapier is sending data to Google Sheets, it used to do it directly into this tab. But then I discovered a weird bug, is that if I filtered and did something like, say, I only want people who've signed up for one of these courses, so like that one, if I filtered by that, it would actually, like my code would actually see that, and that would lead to some weird effects, like it was sending email to the wrong person, because it was assuming that the registration was the last person that appeared in the spreadsheet, and that wasn't always true. So what I learned from that was to have a separate sheet. So first of all, the registration comes in here, and then the script will copy it across to that tab. That's just one of the things I've learned along the way. The other, I guess another thing was part of the last lesson, where we had that template. Let me just go back in here, or in the drive. So you remember in the last lesson, we built this application that copied the template to a spreadsheet for each person. And, oh yeah, there was the template. So, and this was, it is possible to generate a complete spreadsheet using code, but that makes for a lot more code. So this was just something, after I did that once, I was like, why am I doing that? Why don't I just make most of the spreadsheet as a template and then copy it? And it saves me having to write a whole bunch of code to do all of that. Yeah. But I mean, for the most part, those are more like tips. For the most part, I would say don't worry too much about making mistakes. The best is just to try it, and let's start experimenting and trying to use Google Apps Script, and you'll find it's mostly very pleasant and easy to work with once you get started. And then we can get to the homework, and yeah, hopefully we'll have time on this course to maybe build one or two of the use cases you come up with, and build it in a kind of an iterative way. So, you know, we start from zero and actually solve a real problem. Any more questions? I'm just filling up the time. And if not, then I would suggest, yeah. I suggest we end it there, and yeah, go ahead. The get name, was this in the last lesson, Michael? Maybe you want to tell me directly rather than in chat. Okay.
Yeah, so I just wondered, the parameter name, it's like you declare in the function the variable, and that's something I don't actually understand right now, how this thing works.
Okay. So this was the last lesson we did.
Yeah.
And it was this get names function.
Yeah, here you the function get sales targets here.
Okay, and here name. What you said? So this thing was bothering you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just quickly go back to the slides. So because I think it's worth referring to that. Actually, my apologies. It was the previous lesson. Okay, let's go down to.
No, it was the third one, the last one.
Yeah, I just wanted to illustrate this.
Okay, sorry.
So this is slide 21 in lesson 2, but basically when you declare a function, you can put parameters in the function definition. And it's a bit confusing. When you call a function, which is what I'm doing here, these are called the arguments. So the parameters, you could kind of say, are the names of variables and arguments of values. Now, going back to this thing, so what I'm doing here is I'm declaring a parameter called name in this get sales target function, which is going to get used here. So, so what we're doing is when we call get sales target, we say, get me the sales target for Lucas. And then it goes and has a look in the spreadsheet and looks for the rows that match the name Lucas. But basically you can do this. Let's just, yeah, let me just see if I can simplify this to a, so you can just see the raw essence of this. So I don't know, let's make a simple, a function called count numbers, and then, or add, let's call it add numbers. So we give it two parameters, X and Y, and then we say, oops, sorry. So we add those two together, and then we return the total variable. So in effect, the X and Y here is almost the same as doing like var X is giving, it would be the same as doing this, like var Y. It's kind of logically the same idea as declaring variables. So when you put parameters in like this, you've declared them to be available inside the function. And when I say inside the function, I mean the code that's between these two curly brackets. So now if I do, I create another function test, let's say, and I can just say something like result is equal to add numbers 5 and 6. And hopefully the result is going to be 11. Oh, yeah, okay. just call this add numbers, for example. Now I'm just gonna disable the script runtime on V8 because there's a bug in that it makes it. That's the reason why the logging is sometimes very slow to be displayed. But now I run this test function, and it calls my function with 2 arguments, and so we get 11 as a result. Did that answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you were showing right now, but how in this other function you declared the get names, the name as a parameter, and in the next line, in line 39, you compare it if values you ask. I mean, program if the cell is the name, but how does this work?
Okay.
I don't understand that.
So here I'm using, it can be confusing because you're seeing an equal sign. When you see 2 equal signs, so when you have 1 equal sign, you pass a value to a variable. So you know, like if you say x equals 1, you're giving the variable x the value 1. When you have 2 equal signs like this, you're doing a comparison. Now,
yeah, again, and this comparison, you compare with what? So you compare.
Okay, so what I'm doing there is I'm comparing whatever was given as name with if you see its values. So values is all the data in the spreadsheet. I is the row number, and 3 is effectively the column number. So what we're doing then is we're comparing the value of name here with whatever is in this column. So if I can then say, yeah, like down here, get me the sales targets for Mark. So here I'm passing Mark as the argument here. So name takes on the value Mark. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then this function then basically goes through the spreadsheet and looks at all the rows where Mark is the sales responsible, sorry, which is this one, and this one. So what we're doing here is we get all the data basically. We loop through all the data, and as we see each row of data, we're checking that if the sales responsible column matches the name that was given to the function. And then you get the targets out like this. Does that make sense yet?
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's not important what is written in the cells. It could be a name, it could be a number, it could be another string.
Yeah.
Just compares if there is something.
Yeah. So it's basically yeah. I mean, if I put in this in one of those columns, what will happen is it's again the code's going to work. So it's going to say, okay, I've got a number and I'm comparing it to the name. Are they the same? No. So in which case we're not going to add that to the sales targets for Mark. So I think if you've got any programming experience, especially if you're coming from like strongly typed languages like C# and Java, if you've had that kind of experience, doing stuff like this may seem very risky. My experience has been that mostly it's not a problem. So if you do things in a data-driven manner, like whenever something, if someone puts in a number here, like they put in the number for pi, it's still not going to trip up your code. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm really helping now with this explanation.
No, it makes more sense now. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Cool. Any more questions about what we saw today, or homework or anything? Otherwise, okay, so yeah, I'll share the stuff again on Slack. And yeah, I wish you guys a great time without me stressing you to to do homework. So you got extra long time. But and again, like I say, the offer is there. If you want to spend half an hour with me, I can, with specific questions, I'm very happy to do that. So far, Eleanor and Martina were brave enough to take me up on that, but also we've worked together in the past. But don't be shy, I'm very happy to help out. And I think because different people have different backgrounds and experience of code, like for some, this may have been going too slow, but for others, there may be like fundamental things I went through too quickly. And I hope I can get you up to speed. All right. Then I say ciao miteinander.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Harry.
Ciao.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.